She was born in a small and tightly knit tribe where traditions shaped the lives of everyone. From the time she was a young girl, it was clear she was different from the other children. Her body began to develop in ways that set her apart, and by the time she reached womanhood, she carried an appearance that drew whispers, stares, and judgment from her people. She had unusually large breasts, something that should not have mattered, but in the rigid and conservative world of her tribe, it became the reason for her downfall. What should have been a simple feature of her body turned into a mark of shame in the eyes of those around her. Women muttered that she was cursed, men accused her of tempting them, and elders feared that her presence would bring dishonor to their customs. At first, she tried to hide herself. She wrapped her chest in layers of cloth, keeping her head down and her eyes on the ground. But no matter how hard she tried to blend in, people always noticed. The gossip grew louder. The tribe's leaders eventually held a meeting, and after much debate, they came to a cruel conclusion. They decided that her body was a threat to their way of life, that she was a bad influence on younger girls, and that she could not remain among them. In an act that would scar her heart forever, she was banished. The day she was cast out, she walked away from her village with nothing but a small bag of food and water. Her mother cried silently but did not dare protest, fearing punishment herself. The young woman's steps were heavy as she left behind the only home she had ever known. She wandered through the dry lands for days, exhausted and alone, unsure if she would survive. The nights were the hottest. The air grew cold, predators roamed, and the silence reminded her of how unwanted she had become. Yet, deep inside, she clung to a thin thread of hope that somewhere in the wide world, she might find acceptance. Her journey eventually led her across barren fields and into ranching country where vast lands stretched beneath open skies. It was there that her path crossed with a man who would change her life forever. He was a rancher, a quiet and solitary figure who spent his days working the land, tending to cattle, and mending fences. One afternoon, while checking the edges of his property, he spotted her. She was sitting under a tree, weak from hunger, her clothes dusty and torn. At first, he thought she might be lost, but when he approached and saw the sadness in her eyes, he realized there was a deeper story. The rancher offered her water and food. She hesitated, untrusting, but desperation pushed her to accept. Over the next days, he let her rest in a small cabin near his home. Slowly, she shared fragments of her story, the rejection, the cruelty, the way her tribe had judged her body. He listened quietly, never interrupting, never making her feel ashamed. For the first time in her life, she met someone who did not see her as a curse or an object, but simply as a human being. As days turned into weeks, she began helping him with chores around the ranch. She carried feed for the animals, learned to milk the cows, and mended clothing by the firelight. Though she was still healing from the pain of exile, she felt a new sense of purpose. The rancher, too, found comfort in her presence. He had lived alone for many years, carrying the weight of solitude. Her laughter, rare but genuine, brought warmth to his quiet home. One evening, while they sat watching the sun dip below the horizon, she asked him why he had helped her. Most men, she said, would have mocked her or turned her away. He looked at her thoughtfully and explained that the land had taught him something important. Everything in nature has a place. A crooked tree still gives shade, a wounded animal still deserves care, and a person judged unfairly still has worth. Those words sank deep into her heart. For the first time, she felt she belonged. Life on the ranch was not easy. There were storms that tore down fences, winters that froze the water troughs, and long days of labor under the burning sun. But through each challenge, they worked together. She grew stronger, more confident, and less burdened by the cruel voices of her past. Her body was no longer a curse, but simply part of who she was. She realized that strength did not come from fitting into someone else's mold, but from surviving despite rejection. News of her survival eventually reached her old tribe. Some members were shocked to learn that she had not perished. A few even felt guilt, though most tried to dismiss her existence as irrelevant. But she no longer cared what they thought. She had built a new life, one not defined by their narrow rules. What mattered now was the peace she found in the wide open land, in the companionship of the rancher, and in the simple rhythm of days spent with purpose. Over time, her bond with the rancher deepened. They were two souls who had endured loneliness in different ways. She through exile, he through years of isolation. Together they discovered something neither had expected: love. It was not a love based on appearances or superficial attraction, but one rooted in respect, kindness, and shared struggles. The rancher never once judged her body. Instead, he admired her courage, her resilience, and the way she embraced life despite the pain she had endured. Their story became a quiet testament to the power of compassion. Where others had seen a reason to cast her aside, one man had seen a chance to offer kindness. That single choice had transformed both of their lives. She, once branded as an outcast, had become cherished. He, once resigned to a life of solitude, had found companionship. Years later, as they sat together on the porch, watching the cattle graze, she reflected on her journey. She thought of the long walk through the barren lands, of the tears she had shed, and of the cruel words that had been thrown at her. But she also thought of the moment the rancher had extended his hand, of the meals they had shared, and of the laughter that now filled her days. What had once been her greatest sorrow had led her to her greatest joy. Her story spread quietly among neighboring communities. People whispered about the woman who had been cast out and the rancher who had given her a second chance. Some judged, but others admired the courage it took to rebuild a life after so much pain. She did not seek fame or recognition, but in her heart, she knew her journey carried a lesson. No matter how cruel the world may seem, kindness has the power to change everything. For every person who has ever been rejected for being different, her life is proof that worth is not determined by the opinions of others. For every soul who has ever been cast aside, her journey shows that acceptance and love can be found in unexpected places. She was banished by her tribe for something she could not control, yet through resilience and the compassion of one rancher, she found belonging, dignity, and a future filled with hope. When the winds swept across the open plains and the sun painted the sky with streaks of orange, she no longer felt the sting of exile. She felt the strength of survival, the warmth of love, and the unshakable truth that her story was not one of shame but of triumph.